Okay, so we're going to start lesson 2 with the parts of the skeletal system. So there's actually two skeletons that make up the skeletal system. One is the axial skeleton and one is the appendicular skeleton. Now, the axial skeleton is exactly what it sounds like. It runs down the axis of the body. So if you were to take a stick and you were to run it right down the center of the body, this is the axial skeleton. It's your skull, your spinal column, your ribs, your sternum, which is your breastbone, that big flat bone in the front, your hyoid bone, which is this little U-shaped bone in your neck that protects where your uh, tongue is attached, and the tiny bones of the ear, which are the malleus, the incus, and the stapes. You don't need to remember that, just the tiny bones in the ear. Your appendicular skeleton is everything that hangs off of it. So you know how like the skin had appendages like hair and nails? Okay, well, appendicular skeleton is what hangs off of the axial skeleton. Your shoulders, your shoulder girdles, your arms, your wrists, your hands, your hip girdle, your legs, your ankles, and your feet. So the axial skeleton is made up of the skull. There's 22 bones in the skull. There's cranium bones. There's 8 cranium bones that house and protect the brain. Each one has its own name. And then there's 14 facial bones that guard and support your ears, eyes, nose, and mouth. There's large spaces in your facial bones, and those are your sinuses. And we'll get to those a little bit later. But that's basically the skull. Now, the cranial bones are flat and round, and they're fused together. So they come together by those sutures. So you know those little squiggly lines that you see on a skull, and I'll show them to you in the classroom. They are actually considered joints where they meet. Okay, but they're immovable joints, and they are fused to protect the brain. So the bones are thin; they're snugly together by the sutures, and then there's these irregular bands of connective children, and as a child grows they ossify, okay, and that's what fuses them. So you have the coronal suture, which is between the parietal and frontal bone, the lambdoidal suture, which is between the occipital and the parietal bones, the sagittal suture, which is between the two parietal bones, and the squamous suture, which is between the parietal and the temporal bones. Those are the bones of the cranium. So the facial bones are a little bit different. They guard and support your eyes and ears and nose and mouth, and like the tip of your nose is just cartilage. So that's also part of the skeletal system, but it's not bone. But the bones in the cranium are one bone frontal. There's 2 parietal, and that's kind of like that the roof. They're the sides of the skull. The temporal, which houses your ears. Okay, your occipital, which is in the back, and your ethmoid, which forms your nasal septum between your eyes. You also have a sphenoid bone. And the sphenoid bone is kind of, let's see if we can make it bigger. Whoa, okay, maybe not. Well, we'll have to get back to it. But all of the other bones of your skull connect at your sphenoid bone. So it's considered like the key. You have nasal bones. You have 5 nasal bones. 2 are nasal bones that form the bridge of your nose, so where your glasses sit. 1 vomer bone, which forms the lower or midline of the nasal septum. So if we kind of blow this up a little bit here, you can see the vomer is that line right in between. Okay, that's the vomer. Your maxilla, which is your upper jaw, your mandible, which is your lower jaw. You have 2 zygomatic. Those are the ones that make your cheekbones, okay? And 2 palatine that form the hard palate in your mouth. So your mouth has hard palate and soft palate. The 2 bones that form the palate are inside your mouth, and you can actually feel those. And your sinuses are cavities in your facial bones. You have 2 above your eyes, 2 under your eyes, and they moisturize and humidify. They humidify and heat the air going through your nose. Okay, so let's take a look at the skull. I kind of enlarging it. If I don't know if it's enlarging for you to see it, but I hope so. And you can see there's the vomer, frontal bone. Here's the coronal suture that goes right across the top of the head. And you can see from the side all of the different bones, the sphenoid bone, the squamous suture, the temporal bone. It just gives you these are good pictures for you to see exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about the skull bones. Next, we have the spinal column. And you guys already know a lot about the spinal column. Okay. It supports, it's very strong and flexible, right? And the more you work it and work the muscles, it can be very flexible. People can literally fold themselves in half. So it's strong and flexible. It can support a head. Now, remember, you've got all those bones in the head, plus you have the weight of the brain. So the head can be quite heavy. So it's strong enough to support that. It provides attachment for the ribs. It encloses the spinal cord so that your spinal cord is protected, and all of the nerves come out from this side. Um, so the vertebrae are all fit together, and there's little intervertebral discs that are cushions. Okay, they're little cushions. Uh, That's what those discs are. So when you say that you herniated a disc, you've actually, the bone is crunching the disc. Um, During our lifetime, these discs become thinner, and they account for the loss of height. Now, yours truly was 5'5 3/4". I'm now 5'5 1/4". So I've lost about a half an inch, and that's normal. Um, you have 7 cervical vertebra. Now, the book might say 8. I'm not really sure. It doesn't matter. 7 or 8, whatever they want to say is fine with me. But just know this. The first cervical vertebra is located in the neck area, starting at the occipital bone of the just below the skull, and it's what lets us nod. So going yes and no with our head up and down, that's the atlas. The next one, cervical number 2, is your axis, and that allows us to turn our head left and right. Okay, so C1 is for nodding, C2 is for turning. Okay, um, you have 12 thoracic vertebra located in your chest area. Okay, and they articulate the ribs. Okay, your ribs are attached to your spine. The lumbar vertebra, those are the 5 lower ones, and they are very large. They have large bodies because they are supporting most of your body's weight. And that's what you have to protect, right? Because if you hurt your L1 through 5, which I've done multiple times in my life, it really hurts. You have a hard time standing, you have a hard time standing up straight. Then you have your sacrum, which is a wedge shaped bone, um, and it serves an articulation point for the hips. There's 5 of those, and the coccyx, which is your tailbone, and that's formed by 4 fused bones. And your spinal nerves enter and leave the spinal cord through openings in the vertebra. Now, when you fall and you say you break your tailbone, you're talking about your coccyx, and that can really hurt. Um, your spine is curved, creating more strength than a straight spine was. So, babies, are born with a convex curve. So, like a humpback, okay? And so, if you ever see people carrying a baby and it's hanging over their arm, you can see that the baby's spine is completely curved, convex. As they start to be able to lift their head, now they're starting to support their weight. Their spine becomes concave. Okay. So this would be convex. Oops. And this would be concave. All right. This is the anterior part of the spine that's inside your body. This is the exterior, which is outside of your body. All right. Um, we're going to stop here, and I will be back to talk about your sternum and ribs.